Okay, continuing with this chapter on estranged labor on page 52 if you're following along. Again, I'll put a link down below to the book. The direct relationship of labor is to produce the direct relationship of labor to its produce is the relationship of the worker to the objects of production. The relationship of the man of means to the object of production and to production itself is only a consequence of the first relationship. It confirms it. We shall consider this other aspect later. When we ask then, what is the essential relationship of labor, we are asking about the relationship of the worker to production. So, essential, we're talking about an essence, right? So this is something in Germany connected to ideals, right? But what is the essential relationship? That is, what is an essence, regardless of how different people are experiencing the relationship of worker and their specific work to production. Okay. That's a complex way to say a simple thing, but if you were to check every single worker in connection to what they produce, the essence would be that which is the same. And that's why it's similar to Platonic ideals, right? Who is it that said all philosophy is just footnotes to Plato? Seems even Marx, right? Even Marx. Continuing on. Till now, we have been considering the estrangement, the alienation of the worker only in one of its aspects, i.e. the worker's relationship to the products of his labor. That is, when we produce something, we are estranged from it. It goes from us, it makes profit for somebody else, usually. But the estrangement is manifested not only in the result, but in the act of production within the producing activity itself. So let's think about that. Are we estranged from the act of production because what we produce is a product of a company and not my product? Maybe. Let's continue reading, see how he argues this. 1844 is a long time before Marx's mature philosophy, though, in the 1870s, right, with Kapital. Continuing on. How would the worker come to face the product of his activity as a stranger, were it not that the very act of production he was estranging himself from himself? Well, this is true, right? So a professor teaches at a university, right? And then has to pay for their kids to go to that university. Because his labor has been estranged, he has to now take capital money and pay for that which he produces. The product is, after all, but a summary of activity, of production. Education is the activity of production of intellectual labor, right? And this is true for all. I'm just using this as an example. But right, without the professors, the university doesn't exist. Without the education of undergrads. If then the product of labor is alienation, the production itself must be active alienation. Active alienation, does it mean alienating? Because that would be the verb. So that makes sense. The production of labor is alienating. The alienation of activity, the activity of alienation. In the estrangement of the object of labor is merely summarized in estrangement, the alienation in the activity of labor itself. What then constitutes the alienation of labor? So what are the parts? First part. First, the fact that labor is external to the worker, i.e., it does not belong to his essential being. that in his work, therefore, he does not affirm himself, but denies himself, does not feel content, but unhappy, does not develop freely his physical and mental energy, but mortifies his body and ruins his mind. We've all had jobs where we know that's happening, right? Mortifying our body, ruining our mind. We see, as a public school teacher, you see teachers getting into retirement, one step from the grave, high blood pressure, all the stress of the job. They've mortified their body for this. They've ruined their mind. They've denied themselves and they're unhappy. The things we create shouldn't do that for us, right? The worker, therefore, only feels himself outside his work, and in his work feels outside of himself. So self versus work. I'm writing down self versus work. Whew. It's a lot to say here. I think that Karl Marx did not explore this in Capital very much. Maybe he did, just in different terminology. But the self, we feel there's a self. We intuit that there's a self. We have a self. We intuit that we go to work. We are mortifying ourselves in some way, denying ourselves happiness. Okay, let's continue on. He is at home when he is not working. And when he is working, he is not at home. Well, that's just basic, right? You go from home to work, you go from work to home. If you work from home, you have to make a distinction between those things because you're mortifying yourself in a way that you don't want to. Connect it psychologically to your relaxation time. His labor is therefore not voluntary but coerced. This is a big thing in Marx, right? The coercion of labor. If you were with me for the reading of Capital's historical chapter on the removing of peasants from their property, right, and turning them into workers and into the poor, into urbanites, that coercion, right? His labor, therefore, is not voluntary but coerced, right? In the Middle Ages, a laborer could choose to give free labor because they had land producing more than enough food for themselves. So they could choose not to work extra, or they could choose to work extra. Therefore, if they're arguing for wages, right, it's like, well, I don't really need to go do this, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to eat the food I made. But right now, you have no property. You come into the world propertyless. It is forced labor. Yeah, coercion. It is therefore not the satisfaction of a need. It is merely a means to satisfy needs external to it, right? We work for a paycheck. We don't work for joy. We hope that that paycheck allows us to get that need for joy, right? We hope that that paycheck helps us to buy stuff that'll make us happy. We hope that that paycheck will help us raise our family better. Continue on. Its alien character emerges clearly in the fact that as soon as no physical or other compulsion exists, labor is shunned like the plague. External labor, labor in which man alienates himself, is a labor of self-sacrifice, of mortification. Lastly, the external character of labor for the worker appears in the fact that it is not his own, but someone else's. That it does not belong to him. It belongs not to himself, but to another. The capitalist, right? Just as in religion, the spontaneous activity of the human imagination, of the human brain and the human heart operates independently of the individual, that is, operates on him as an alien, divine, or diabolical activity. In the same way, the worker's activity are not his spontaneous activity, it belongs to another. It is a loss of his self. Loss of self. Well, there's 10 minutes of Capital. We'll continue there on page 53, where we're getting into species being more specifically, finally, which is my favorite part of this whole chapter. See you there.